Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The camera shutter clicked just as he leaned in close, his breath warm against the shell of my ear. I thought he was about to say something sweet, some wedding day cliché like "I'll love you forever," or maybe a quick inside joke to make me laugh in front of all those people staring at us like we were a painting instead of two real human beings. But instead, in that low, dead tone that no one else could hear but me, he whispered the words that would split my world right down the middle like a hairline crack in a wine glass, just before it shatters. "You'll never be good enough for my family." I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away or even blink. I just smiled for the photographer, my face stretched in the kind of grin that would look beautiful in frames and trashy magazines, and I let the words melt right into my spine like cold water pouring down the back of my dress. My hand was in his. The dress was perfect. The guests were applauding. And I was already somewhere else entirely in my mind, pulling away from this man in slow motion, like a bird trying to escape a wedding cage it never realized it walked into. He said it so casually, like he'd been waiting to deliver that one final blow, just after the rings and before the champagne. I almost laughed, honestly. Because Derek had always walked that thin line between polished and cruel, his insults dipped in sugar, his love always just out of reach. But this was bold. This was a different level. This was a man revealing his final form. And maybe, in some sick way, he thought I'd cry. Or break. Or run. But instead, I just pressed my lips against his and whispered back, "Smile for the camera, sweetheart." What he didn't know, what nobody in that white-laced, overpriced, arrogant room knew, was that I already had a backup plan. We met in the most painfully average way possible, coffee shop. 2 orders mixed up, one polite joke later, and he was in my messages. At first, Derek was every bit the picture of what I thought I wanted. Tall, clean-cut, a good job, the kind of dry humor that made you feel like you were in on something secret. He always picked the nicest restaurants, opened car doors, offered to pay but never made it a big deal. You know the type. The kind of man your mom would love but your gut would warn you about. Except I was tired of listening to my gut. It had gotten me nowhere but broke and alone and tired of dating men who wore socks with sandals and couldn't spell conscience if it walked up and punched them in the mouth. Derek was the upgrade I thought I deserved. The grown-up version of the fixer-upper I usually dated. He had polish, charm, manners. And more importantly, he had that soft way of reassuring me, saying things like, "My mom's just old-fashioned. She'll warm up to you." Trust me. I did. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. It started small. A correction here, a jab there. The first time he laughed at the way I said library in front of his father, I laughed too. The second time, at dinner with his mother, I noticed how he corrected my story halfway through, like I needed help telling my own life. I told myself not to make it a big deal. Not everything is a red flag, some things are just misunderstandings, right? But then came the brunch with his sisters. And the way they asked if my dress was from Target, not with curiosity, but with that sharp, surgical condescension that cuts clean and leaves no blood. I was too stunned to reply, and Derek just sipped his mimosa like he hadn't heard a thing. But I let it slide. Again. Again. And again. Because I believed the lie that love is compromise and marriage is patience. But what I didn't realize was that Derek's family didn't want a daughter-in-law. They wanted a mannequin they could dress up and take to church on holidays. A woman who would laugh politely when they insulted her, who would clean up their messes without being asked, who knew her place in the family tree, and it sure as hell wasn't anywhere near the top. The wedding was their masterpiece. They paid for everything and reminded me constantly that they paid for everything. His mother picked the venue. His sisters chose the cake. I was asked not to wear heels higher than 3 inches because it might make the family photos look disproportionate. When I offered to help with costs, Judith, his mother, smiled that wolf smile and said, "Just show up on time, dear. We've got the rest handled." I should have known then. But I showed up. I smiled. I said the vows. And I buried that whispered insult deep in my chest like a thorn I'd dig out later. So I stood there, white dress glowing in the late afternoon sun, ring warm on my finger, and I made a decision. Not to forgive. Not to forget. But to play the game. And win. Because if I wasn't good enough for them, then they'd damn well remember me. Every single day. As the crowd clapped and the photographer called us over for one more picture near the fountain, I reached down into my bouquet. No one saw it. No one noticed. It was so smooth, so practiced, like I'd done it 100 times before. I pulled out the small velvet pouch and slid it gently into the bodice of my dress, right between my ribs and my rage. Nobody noticed. But someday they would. And that's when the game really started. The first time I met Judith Marshall, she didn't offer to shake my hand. She just looked me up and down like she was appraising the resale value of a used Honda and said, "Derek usually dates women with more polish." Then she smiled, as if that made it any less of a slap in the face. I remember standing there, half-hugged by her perfume cloud, thinking this woman must iron her sheets and threaten her gardeners with passive-aggressive prayers. From that moment on, it became clear that Judith didn't dislike me because of who I was. She disliked me because I wasn't who she thought her son deserved. She reminded me of those PDA moms with tight faces and tighter bank accounts, the kind who always found a way to mention their second home without actually saying the words second home. Everything was a performance. Every dinner a test I didn't study for. I became a character in their family drama, the uninvited guest who just wouldn't take the damn hint. Judith played hostess with the kind of smile that hid knives behind every compliment. She'd say things like, "Oh, you work in marketing? That's cute," or "I'm sure your parents did the best they could with what they had." I'd smile right back and say thank you, while mentally slashing a tally mark on my invisible list. Because yes, by then I'd started keeping notes. Literal ones. I had a notebook hidden in the back of my dresser drawer, behind old tax forms and expired nail polish. Every snub, every comment, every look that lasted a second too long, all of it went in there. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed to stay sane. When someone gaslights you long enough, you start to wonder if you're being too sensitive. But the notebook didn't lie. The notebook kept score when no one else would. Dinners with the Marshall family were a full-contact sport. Judith made sure I always sat at the far end of the table, away from Derek, like I was contagious. She'd serve me last, always a little less on the plate than everyone else, as if to remind me that I wasn't truly part of the pack. Derek never said a word. Not once. Not even when his mother brought up his ex-girlfriend, twice during a single brunch, describing her as elegant, refined, and from the right kind of family. I pretended not to notice, even when she passed me the salt and said, "Megan used to make the most incredible quiche." I smiled. I always smiled, because I'd learned that silence was a more powerful weapon than screaming. That quiet was the sharpest blade. And while Judith played her game of control, I started documenting everything. Spending, conversations, behavior patterns. I took screenshots of texts, saved voicemails, made backups. If she even looked at me sideways, I wrote it down. Not because I was paranoid, but because Judith didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't some fragile ornament Derek had picked up at a farmer's market. I'd grown up in a family that knew how to play dirtier games than she could dream of. But I was smarter. I played long. At home, things weren't any better. Derek was charming in public, Mr. Perfect husband with his blazer and bullshit, but behind closed doors, the mask cracked just enough to let the rot seep through. He started keeping tabs on my spending, making comments like, "Do you really need more makeup?" Or, "My mom says a woman doesn't need all that to look nice." I laughed it off at first, until one day I came home to find he'd rearranged my side of the closet because, in his words, it looked cluttered and unkempt. The same words his mother used when she first saw my apartment. I should have left then. I know that now. But I stayed because I thought I could turn it around. I thought if I just held out long enough, they'd come to respect me. I was wrong. So instead, I stopped trying to earn their love and started planning their downfall. One night, while we were going over our wedding budget, yes, after the fact, he brought out a spreadsheet his mother had made, with every itemized expense down to the monogrammed napkins. Derek smirked and said, "She just wants to make sure you understand what she invested." That night, I started comparing what I had spent against what they claimed to have gifted us. I calculated that I had covered the photography, the flowers, the music deposit, and our honeymoon clothes. Somewhere around 11,000 in total. No, wait, maybe that was 1,300? Whatever, I was too mad to care about the math. I didn't say anything. I just updated my notes. That week, Judith posted a photo on Facebook of the happy couple, cropped so tightly my face was almost out of frame. The caption? "Couldn't be more proud of our boy." Not our children, not the newlyweds, our boy. The golden child. The favorite son. The one who could do no wrong, even if he shit on her welcome mat. Then came the message. It arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning. No greeting. No punctuation. Just 7 words. "We know who you really are, Leah." I stared at the screen, heart still and cold. And I smiled. Because if they really knew me, they'd be scared. The night of our wedding, I didn't cry. Not even once, not even when the photographer packed up and the music stopped and we were alone for the first time as husband and wife in a hotel room that smelled like roses and expensive soap and pretense. I didn't scream or throw anything or demand an apology for what he'd whispered at the altar. Instead, I folded the dress carefully, hung it in the closet like a costume I'd never wear again, and slipped into the silk nightgown Judith had accidentally gifted me 2 sizes too small, just to remind me I was never going to fit into their world. Derek was already drunk. Half a bottle of champagne gone, bow tie undone, hair tousled just enough to pass for handsome in the right lighting. He said I looked beautiful. I smiled and said thank you. He asked me if I was happy. I said ecstatic. And I meant it, but not for the reasons he thought. Because somewhere between the first course and the first dance, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even humiliated. I was wide awake. A switch had flipped inside me, one I didn't even know existed until the moment that man leaned in and told me to my face I'd never be good enough. And instead of falling apart, I smiled wider than I ever had before. Because if that was true, if I was never going to be accepted, then I had nothing left to lose. And a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous person in any room. So I didn't fight him. I didn't question him. I started nodding more, agreeing more, listening more. I started asking small questions, things no one would find suspicious, like who handled the family taxes or where the business accounts were managed. I complimented his father's cufflinks and brought up sports, even though I didn't care. I made myself forgettable, like wallpaper. Quiet, pleasant, compliant. The perfect little doll wife. But I was listening to every word, watching every move, mapping the soft spots in their armor. It didn't take long to figure out the weak link in the Marshall fortress, his father, Philip. A quiet man, decent if distant, always half-lost in business reports or golf tournaments, more interested in quarterly profits than personal conflict. He wasn't cruel like Judith or slippery like Derek. He was just tired. And in that tiredness, I found cracks. I started having coffee with him in the mornings when we stayed over, asking questions about the family business, not too direct, not too eager, just enough to seem curious. He liked being listened to. People like Philip are so used to being overlooked that when someone finally pays attention, they open up like a bad faucet. And he did. I learned how the Marshall family money was tied up in real estate and consulting, how the business operated under 3 names, each registered in different states for liability. I learned who managed the books, his cousin, Craig, who once got audited for minor inconsistencies. I even learned where Judith kept her personal checkbooks, 3rd drawer in her upstairs desk, locked but with the key taped underneath. I didn't need to touch it. Just knowing was enough. Then came the credit statements. I found one in our mail addressed to me, strange, since I hadn't opened any accounts with their family's bank. When I checked it, I nearly dropped the damn thing. Derek had taken out a loan in both our names. Not a small one, either $45,000, with my signature forged, and the funds invested into a shell company under his friend's name. I waited 2 days before saying anything. I wanted him calm. I needed him predictable. When I brought it up, Derek didn't even blink. He said, "You agreed to that. Don't you remember? Over dinner." The way he said it, like it was obvious, like I was the forgetful one, made something inside me go cold and flat. Gaslighting 101. He didn't care that I knew. He just wanted me to doubt myself enough not to do anything. But I smiled and said, "Oh, right. Of course. I must have forgotten." And then I started planning in earnest. I called a lawyer, quietly, discreetly, a woman named Donna who worked out of a nondescript office on the edge of town and had eyes like a hawk. I told her everything. We made a plan. I opened a secret bank account, moved small amounts from my personal savings, told Derek it was for house upgrades and furniture planning. He didn't ask for proof. Why would he? I was playing the role of loyal wife, so while he stopped looking for anything beneath the surface, I started sending myself digital backups, screenshots, contracts, emails, voice memos. I had a whole Dropbox folder labeled wedding photos that was really just documentation of every lie he'd ever told, every expense he'd ever hidden, every text between him and his mother strategizing ways to ease Leah out of the family picture. I made myself undeniable. I attached myself to parts of the business in small but significant ways, redesigning their consulting brand's website, managing some marketing invoices, getting CC'd on certain emails that no one thought twice about. So that when the walls came down, my fingerprints would be all over the foundation. They couldn't erase me without toppling their own damn house. I was deep in it now. Too deep to pull out without bringing the whole structure crashing down. And that was fine. That was exactly what I wanted. Because every smile I gave, every compliment I paid, every stupid moment I played dumb, I was planting seeds. And soon, they were going to bloom. One afternoon, about 6 months after the wedding, a package arrived at our front door. No return address, no label, just a plain padded envelope with my name written in thick black marker. Derek was at work. I opened it with scissors and shook the contents onto the table. One flash drive. No note. No explanation. I plugged it into my laptop and waited. There was only one file. No title, no timestamp. I clicked it, and there he was. Derek. In a hotel room. With someone who wasn't me. And he was smiling. I watched the entire video once, from beginning to end, with the volume down low and the windows shut tight, the daylight spilling through the curtains like a lie that didn't know where to land. Derek wasn't just cheating, he was performing. Like he had something to prove, like the betrayal wasn't only intentional, but theatrical. It wasn't just sex, it was a statement. I remember how he laughed, loud, loose, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen since our wedding night, and something inside me stopped being sad and started being surgical. There were no more doubts. No more questions. The knife was already in me, but now I was twisting it back toward him. But I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or pack a bag or make a dramatic exit in the middle of the night. Instead, I did what he never expected. I stayed quiet. I cleaned the kitchen, folded the towels, and kissed him on the cheek when he came home like nothing had changed. And while he slept, I uploaded the video to a private drive, attached a simple message, and sent it to one recipient only, Judith Marshall. No caption. No warning. Just the footage. 3 days passed in silence. Not a word from her, not even a subtle jab at brunch. I thought maybe she'd pretend it never happened. Maybe she'd sweep it under one of her expensive rugs and continue her little charade of class and control. But then, Sunday afternoon, she called. Her voice was cold and sharp, like a slap with pearls wrapped around it. "You should be ashamed," she said, not even bothering to say hello first. "I know what you sent. I saw what you did." "What I did?" I asked, already smiling to myself. "You seduced him into cheating. You made him miserable. What kind of wife are you, Leah? You should have tried harder to make him happy." I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until she had to breathe to fill it. Then I answered in the calmest voice I've ever used in my life. "Then why did he say 'I do' while inside her?" She hung up. The next week, Derek began to unravel in public. Apparently, the video had made its rounds quietly, among the family first, then through whispers in the office. I didn't need to spread it. People like Judith always overreact enough to do the dirty work for you. Derek tried to cover it, tried to act like nothing had changed, but it started eating at him. He got short with coworkers, sloppy with emails, rude to clients. And just like that, the consulting firm he clung to like a lifeline decided he wasn't worth the trouble. Fired. Just like that. No severance. No ceremony. Just a cardboard box and silence. He came home that day with blood in his eyes, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal, asking how the hell it all happened. I told him I didn't know. I stirred the soup. I hummed softly. I didn't offer theories or sympathy. I let him spin himself into exhaustion, then watched him collapse into the same chair Judith used to criticize my posture in. What he didn't know, what no one knew, not even my lawyer yet, was that over the last few months, I had acquired a silent stake in the consulting business through a third party. A friend of mine from college who owed me a favor had quietly purchased just enough shares to hold influence, then transferred them under a trust one controlled. No one noticed because they never saw me coming. I was the decorative wife, the girl from the wrong side of town, the placeholder until he came to his senses. I was the ghost in their walls. And now, with the right nudges, a few conversations, and a well-timed meeting or two, I pulled those strings. Contracts that should have renewed disappeared. Clients stopped calling. Their biggest investor backed out without explanation. I didn't even have to lie. I just had to tell the truth to the right people, in the right order, with the right tone of voice. By the time Derek realized something was happening, the accounts were already bleeding. The only savings we had left were the ones I'd hidden away under my name, in my account, in a bank he didn't even know I used. When I finally told him I was leaving, he tried to act like he had leverage, like he could scare me into staying. He threatened lawyers, court dates, reputational destruction. But all I did was hand him a folder. Inside were copies of every loan he took out using my name, every forged signature, every text message to his mother about how I was getting too clever, every credit card bill with someone else's hotel charges on it. I had voice memos from conversations he didn't know I recorded. I had screenshots of messages he'd sent to his ex, detailing plans for a new life without me and without the prenup his mother made us sign. He flipped through the pages like they were written in another language. Then he looked at me, for the first time without anger or contempt, and saw the person he never truly knew. "You said I'd never be good enough," I told him, standing calm and clear across the kitchen. "But here you are, 39 years old, unemployed, broke, and begging your mommy for a place to crash. Who's beneath who now?" I didn't wait for an answer. 2 days later, I changed the locks. A week after that, I got a call at 7:30 in the morning. Judith's voice was different this time. Not cold, not composed, just small, defeated. "He's moved back in," she said through quiet sobs. "I don't know what to do with him." I almost felt bad. Almost. The house is quiet now in the kind of way that doesn't feel empty, but earned. There's no more angry footsteps down the hall, no buzzing cell phone with Judith's name lighting up like a warning, no fake laughter echoing off the walls at dinner parties filled with people who smiled too wide and drank just enough to forget who they were insulting. Now, it's just the creak of hardwood floors beneath bare feet, the scent of coffee that's strong enough to punch back, and the sound of birds waking up before the sun. Peace doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes, it just tiptoes in after the war's over and waits for you to notice. I had almost forgotten what mornings could feel like when they weren't built around someone else's expectations. These days I get up early, not because I have to, but because I want to. I sit on the porch wrapped in an old sweater that used to belong to my dad and sip coffee so dark it should be illegal. I don't wear makeup anymore unless I feel like it. I eat my toast with too much butter and don't count the calories. I laugh out loud when something is funny, even if no one's around to hear it. There's no one here to tell me I'm too loud, too messy, too much. And I don't miss being told that I'm not enough. It was a Tuesday when he called again. Derek. The name still made my throat tighten a little, not because I missed him, God, no, but because it reminded me how easily I let myself be fooled. The number came up as unknown, but I answered anyway, mostly out of curiosity, partly because I already knew what he was going to say. It had been almost a month since he moved back into Judith's basement, a month of silence, a month of whispers through mutual friends about how the mighty had fallen and taken half the silverware with him. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was doing. His voice was quieter than I remembered, almost hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days or maybe hadn't stopped screaming since I left. Just 3 words, all breath and regret, like a balloon deflating slowly into nothing. You win, he said. I didn't say a word. I let the silence wrap around him like a blanket made of glass. Then I hung up. No goodbye, no closure, nothing to feed the wounded ego still clawing for attention on the other end of the line. That was the last thing I owed him. Nothing. And I gave it generously. What Derek didn't know, what no one knows really, is that I never sent that video to anyone but Judith. I never forwarded it, never posted it, never even hinted at it. And yet somehow it spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of his life that he couldn't hide from. It was like the universe had taken the wheel and said, "Don't worry, Leah, I've got this one." I didn't push the dominoes. I just made sure they were all lined up properly. I still don't know who leaked it. Maybe it was one of his old flings, God knows there were enough of them. Maybe someone finally got tired of being disposable. Or maybe, and this is the one that keeps me up at night with a smirk, maybe it was his brother's wife. She always did ask too many questions. Always looked at me with a little more understanding than she should have had. Maybe she found it in his emails or on some shared device. Or maybe she was just waiting for someone else to strike first so she could deliver the killing blow. Whatever the truth is, I don't care. The tape got out. Derek's reputation got destroyed. His career collapsed. And I didn't have to lift another damn finger to make it happen. That's the thing about people like him, they do most of the damage to themselves. You just have to step back and let gravity do its job. A few nights ago, I dreamed about our wedding again. Not the dress or the flowers or the vows, but the whisper. That line, soft and venomous, slipping past his lips like poison into my ear. You'll never be good enough for my family. It used to haunt me, echo around my skull like a curse I couldn't shake. But in the dream, something was different. This time, I turned to him and said, "Good." I wasn't trying to be. Then I walked away before he could answer. This morning, I sat on the porch just like I always do. The sun hadn't fully come up yet, and the sky was smeared with that pink and purple streak that makes the world feel like it's still deciding what kind of day to be. My coffee steamed in the mug between my hands. The air smelled like wet earth and quiet victory. My phone buzzed once. A single message. I miss you. Please talk to me. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted. Not because I wanted to respond. But because I couldn't help thinking, what kind of man burns his whole life down and then asks the woman holding the fire extinguisher to come back and help rebuild? I blocked the number without replying. I sat back, took another sip of coffee, and watched the sky get lighter. He said I'd never be good enough for his family. Turns out, I didn't have to be. I just had to outlast them.